Hello, great souls. Welcome to our Living Yoga Satsang talk. Let's take a moment to begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of Kriya Yoga, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Oktashwar, and Paramhansa Yogananda ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Guide us this day as we journey through the autobiography of a yogi. Help us to receive the treasures and blessings this sacred book offers us. Help us to apply them to our own journey of awakening and to be a light in the journey of others. Bless us now and always, and help us to be receptive to thy blessings. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, so today we're looking at chapter 15, and lots of humor in this chapter. It's a delightful chapter. It's called The Cauliflower Robbery. So one of the things that really stood out to me in this chapter was this playful way in which Shri Oktashwar worked with his disciples and with Yogananda in particular, because that's what we know about in this chapter, are these lessons that he taught with a lighthearted humor. So it was really, I mean, delightful just feels like the right word. So in the beginning of the chapter, Yogananda said that he was on summer break from his college studies, and he was going to spend the summer at the ashram in Puri. And he brought as a gift for his guru 6 large cauliflowers. And Shri Oktashwar was very grateful for them, appreciated the gift, and said, place these in your room, and we'll use them tomorrow. We'll have use of them tomorrow. So Yogananda carefully stored them underneath his bed. And then Shri Oktashwar said to him and to his fellow disciples, let's go to the beach, right? So off they go, leaving the ashram, they're walking, and they don't get very far. And Shri Oktashwar says, wait, did you lock the back door of the ashram? And Yogananda said, yes, he did. And Shri Oktashwar corrects him and says, no, you didn't. And so let me read what he says. Actually, right before that, there's an interesting point. So when they're walking, he notices that the way that they're walking is apparently kind of chaotic, right? Not rhythmic, not unison, not energetically together. So Shri Oktashwar comments that our Western brothers, meaning I can imagine people in America, perhaps also in Europe, but he says, when our Western brothers walk, they usually take pride in unison. Now please march in 2 rows, keep rhythmic step with one another. Shri Oktashwar watched as we obeyed, and he began to sing. Boys go to and fro in a pretty little row. And this is Yogananda, I could not but admire the ease with which Master was able to match the brisk pace of his young students. And so, and that's something Yogananda talked about periodically in Autobiography, was this incredible vitality, physical vitality that he observed in Shri Oktashwar. So he had a vibrancy to his physical body that was notable, So age, he didn't show the signs. He did have gray hair, and when I see pictures of him, he looked older, but he had a certain kind of physical vitality that was notable. So then Shri Oktashwar says, halt, and he looks at Yogananda, asks about the back door, and Yogananda says, yes, I locked it, and then Shri Oktashwar is silent for a few minutes, and these are his words. No, you forgot, he said finally. And this is Shri Oktashwar speaking to Yogananda, divine contemplation must not be made an excuse for material carelessness. You have neglected your duty in safeguarding the ashram. You must be punished. And so then a little bit later, and Yogananda said he thought he was joking. He didn't think he was being serious. And so he tells Yogananda and the other young disciples, the students, let's head back towards the ashram. So they turn around and they head back. But before they get to the ashram, he has them stop. He tells everyone to rest. And then he speaks to Yogananda and says, look across the compound on our left. Observe the road beyond. A certain man will arrive there presently. He will be the means of your chastisement. So then he goes on to tell the story of a man who he describes as a peasant acting kind of in a wild way, he says he's dancing about and seeming unbalanced. He seems to be unbalanced. And so he's observing this man and watches in astonishment as the man goes to the ashram. Then he disappears, and Shri Oktashwar says he will, after this man goes into the ashram, you will have 5 cauliflowers and not just one. Yogananda can't believe it. So the man, he sees him, he disappears for a short time, then he comes back holding a prized cauliflower. And Yogananda is so upset that he runs after him and tries to catch him, but he isn't able to catch him. So then he's stunned by the whole experience. It's surprising to him. How did this happen? How did Shri Oktashwar know that the door was unlocked? How did he know that this man was going to appear and go into the ashram and steal the cauliflower? And one of the things that Yogananda did when they got back to that evening to the ashram, he went right into his room and he saw that on his bed were his gold rings and other valuables he had laid out on his bed that were untouched. Everything in his room was untouched except for underneath where the 6 cauliflowers had been placed, one was missing. And that too was surprising. Why did this man, he said had a vegetable fixation. So then he asks Shri Oktashwar, how did you do that? Like, I don't understand how that happened. And Shri Oktashwar says, you will understand it someday. Science will soon discover a few of these hidden laws. And then Yogananda goes on to talk about the radio, which came out shortly after that. The radio was discovered. And it was an astonishing, I mean, truly, I still consider it astonishing, discovery of that sound could be transmitted. It could be picked up and transmitted. And when the radio was introduced, Yogananda understood what Shri Oktashwar was saying, that science had brought into awareness an ability. And what he also recognized is that Shri Oktashwar had that ability, that he could do what a radio could do. He could pick up on thoughts. So he was able to pick up on a thought. And I want to see if okay, I'm going to read a little bit. Well, anyways, I'll just say what he says. So Shri Oktashwar could pick up on that thought, and he was able to recognize, he heard it. He heard this man who had longed for a cauliflower. And so he recognized that, and he thought, well, he can take care of 2 things here. He can teach Yogananda, you need to be mindful of your material responsibilities, and it's not okay to shirk them off with the thought that, well, divine communion is more important. We need to be attentive to our responsibilities. And this is a balancing act that's addressed in different ways from different perspectives in the autobiography. And so this is one of the times that Yogananda is being taught that you need to be attentive to your material responsibilities. Don't make excuses, is what Shri Oktashwar is saying. So then he discovered that his guru was capable of hearing, and he told him he could hear the thought, and then he could send the thought to that man. Well, here's where you'll find a cauliflower. And that's all the man wanted, was that cauliflower. So he went in and he saw, and it was hidden. He would have to have been guided to find it. And he found it and he took it and he was delighted and left. So it is astonishing. But then Yogananda begins to talk about how we all have this capacity. And many of us have had the experience of a hunch that we can't explain. That we've tuned into something, is what he says. He said that, and this is a yogic teaching, that thoughts are, they float on a vibration in the ether. So they, just as the radio can pick up thoughts, we're picking up thoughts. In fact, what he said is that we're tuning into thoughts all the time. And whatever we're thinking, he's not saying this here, I'm expounding on this a little bit in yogic teaching, and he says this in other places, that there's a sentence in this chapter, a famous sentence of teaching of Yogananda's, which is, thoughts are universally rooted, not individually. So I'm going to use those two things to talk a little bit more about the yogic teaching on this. The idea, as I was beginning to say, whatever thoughts are coming to me, they sound like mine. They feel like mine. I'm thinking. Seems like I'm thinking this, right? So maybe I'm discouraged. Let's just use that as an example. Maybe I'm feeling discouraged, and I'm having discouraged thoughts. I can say a little bit more also. In a previous chapter, we might have talked about this, but let me just stay on track with this right now. So I'm having thoughts of discouragement. What Yogananda has said is that that's because of a particular vibration I've tuned into that are in harmony with discouraging thoughts. So what I learned when I learned that in the practice of yoga, it was, and continues to be, I will say, a phenomenal blessing to recognize, first off, I don't need to identify with those thoughts, which is very easy to do, and it certainly was easy for me to do. So let's say I have discouraging thoughts, and then I feel bad about being discouraged. Why am I so discouraged? Maybe something's going on, and I had been hopeful, and then I'm discouraged. And I can be thinking, I'm not only discouraged, but now I'm discouraged that I'm discouraged. So I'm judging myself for having those thoughts. In the teaching of yoga, they're not who I am. I've tuned into something. I don't know how. I mean, sometimes, I'll say a little bit about environment and how that can play a part. But for the moment, let's say I don't know why. That happens. It happens to me. I don't know why. Certain thoughts will come in and they'll surprise me because the length of time that I've practiced yoga has changed the thoughts that I have on a regular basis. I can still have discouraging thoughts. The gift for me today is that I recognize them, that they're not mine, and I can do something about it by changing the channel I've tuned into. So using yogic practices and techniques, yoga postures, very effective. One of the things that Yogananda talked about here in terms of vibration of thoughts is intuition. So the power of intuition, it's all within this teaching. And what we need in order to have intuition, to tune into, to consciously tune into vibrations. Let me take a sip of water here. Excuse me. So to at will tune into vibrations, we need to have a calm mind for that. If the mind is agitated, it's very difficult, could be even impossible. Intuition does not go with an agitated mind. So I was mentioning yoga postures. Yoga postures are a very effective practice for calming the whole nervous system and the mind with that. So it's not uncommon that you could feel very restless at the beginning of a yoga practice, and even a short practice, find yourself relaxed in your body, calm in the heart, which calms the mind. And so when I notice that my thoughts feel off, I would say, then what I know is I can, one of the tools I can use are yoga postures. Excuse me, another tool is pranayama, breathing techniques, working with the breath, which again calms the physical body, it calms the nervous system, the heart, and the mind. And affirmations are a very powerful tool for shifting the consciousness and finding a different radio station. And that's, I think, because I grew up with the radio, it really resonated for me. This experience, one that comes to mind for me is driving. I've done a lot of long distance driving and driving across the country earlier in my life. And one of the things I noticed on long drives is the radio station changes. Like, you can't pick up the same station that you would have locally, so you have to tune the radio and you pick up a new station. Well, the other thing I noticed is I could be listening to a station and then suddenly, a strange station comes in. What's that station? How did that happen? And so you might have to adjust, back in the day, the dial, and now it's buttons, and I honestly don't know how much people listen to the radio anymore. But adjusting it so that you can pick up the right station. And that's really the metaphor that Yogananda is using in this chapter to explain to us how we can work with our own thoughts. So part of it is to recognize these thoughts are not me. They're not who I am. I've tuned into something. So and also connected to this is that we can tune into a very high vibration, which is actually a reflection of who we are. So one of the things, I think I've talked about this in an earlier discussion, Yogananda identified 8 aspects in the material realm that we can experience our divine self. And one of those aspects is joy. I often, when I'm talking about this, have to count it out to make sure I get them all. So there's joy, peace, calmness, power, wisdom, light, sound, and he talks later in the chapter about Om, the vibration of Om, and love, perfect love. So when you are having thoughts that are in alignment with any of those 8 qualities, we are tuned in to our own highest self, and I'm tuned into God. So this is a practice in our thoughts of inner communion. And again, it's recognizing, I'm saying this because there are many thoughts that come through me that aren't me, and I don't identify with them. When the thoughts come in of peace, that is in yogic teaching who we are. So those thoughts, it's basically what I say to myself is I'm aligned. I know I'm aligned with my highest truth when my thoughts are peaceful, when my thoughts are calm, when my thoughts are joyful. Swami Kriyananda said, when you feel optimistic and hopeful, you're tuned into divine consciousness, because that is the consciousness of God. It's the consciousness of our highest self. So working with our thoughts in a way that we aren't judgmental. And it's been my observation in my own journey and then working with other students, this is really quite a practice and not so easy to do. It's just interesting to note to me how often self-criticism comes in. Again, depending on that's a particular vibration, right? A critical vibration to tune into. But it can really help I found for myself and others I'm working with to simply remind myself, okay, I've tuned into that station, but I don't have to be a prisoner of that radio station. There are practices I can engage with that will eventually align me with something else that is my higher truth. The other piece that Yogananda talked about in this practice is energy. He said, you know, a radio station, part of how it works is that it has power. So the more powerful that station, the more it can transmit energy and thoughts, and the more it can receive them. A lot of our yoga practice, affirmation, meditation, yoga postures, chanting, a lot in this chapter, he talks about the power of chanting. And the power, because again, music is a vibration. So finding ways to engage with this principle of consciousness, of how to work with our consciousness. He's laying it out here in how his guru laid it out to him, right? He, later in the chapter, because there's all these gems, all these different gems, Yogananda, something was missing in the ashram, and he thought, oh, well, Shri Oktashwar has this power, we can ask him, right? And Shri Oktashwar, again, in a very playful way, he recognized what was happening. So he said to the student, he said to all the students in a very grave tone, you know, who has misplaced the lamp? And one of the students, you know, sheepishly admits he had the lamp and to go to the well. So Shri Oktashwar, in a very stern and grave voice, says, "Go," you know, as if as if he's tuning into something, and says, "Go look for the lamp by the well." So Yogananda runs out to look for it, and it's not there. The lamp isn't there. It comes back, and Shri Oktashwar is laughing. Right? He's filled with mirth and joy, and saying, and Yogananda realized, oh, okay, he understood that these powers that we attain, they are part of what we're built into us to be able to do. Intuition is part of how we are made. We're made this way, to be able to lift our consciousness to our highest truth and tune into feeling omnipresence, right? That's the journey of self-realization, is ultimately fully realizing the capacity of who we are. We are full of potential. And this is, so it's a teaching of both who we are and what our potential is, but then how do we use those powers? And what Yogananda observed in Shri Oktashwar is he did not use them for trivial purposes. Right? So he said he's not a fortune teller. Right? And so he didn't try to, he said, and he also said, I'm not a very good Sherlock Holmes either. And it was his way of saying, and this appears in the autobiography throughout, that when powers are demonstrated, it's for a purpose. And Yogananda in his own life he did demonstrate miracles in his life as well, but he only did that when he was guided by the divine to do that. And there are incredible stories of direct disciples. Swami Kriyananda was a direct disciple. Many amazing stories of miraculous events. One of them in the movie, it might be The Answer. This is the story of, I think it might be in The Answer, so I'll just say that. And it tells the story of Swami Kriyananda. It's a story of him. It's a disciple just finding Yogananda, and stories about Yogananda. And one of them is a story I've also read in other places of Dr. Lewis, his first American disciple. And one day Yogananda wanted to take him on a drive, invited him on a drive, and there was a torrential rainstorm. And Dr. Lewis, I guess because of the rain, didn't really want to go out, but he didn't want to turn down being with his guru. So he agreed to go. And then when he went outside and opened the door, the rain had stopped, the sun was shining, and there wasn't a drop of wet anywhere. And he was kind of spinning a little bit, trying to understand what was going on. And when he approached the car, Yogananda said, "Just for you." So there's such a sweetness to that. And there were times when it was meaningful, when it's meaningful to help people see what their own capacity is. And this is part of the value of sharing miracles, is to help us rise in our own understanding of our potential, of who we can be, and to keep moving toward that. So let me see if there's anything else, a little bit of time left. Well, I think I'll skip towards the back. And as I said, there's a whole nother section that goes very deeply into the power of sound and the power of music and the power of chanting. And what comes to mind in this moment, Ananda, there's incredible opportunities to listen and sing along with chanting through Ananda, even with the shelter in place. So as a resource, you can go to our website, the Sangha website, Ananda Palo Alto Sangha. And if you look for chanting or kirtans, there are kirtans that you can watch virtually. And there's just many, many resources, but I'll just say that, just offer that in case you haven't had an opportunity to listen or participate in the chanting. So at the end of the chapter, Yogananda shares another teaching from his guru. And this teaching happens, there's a festival. Let me turn my page right here. So there's a kirtan, so that he's talking all about the music, and then there's a kirtan. And then the whole thing is over. So it's a big event and it's over. And Shri Oktashwar says, "I'm pleased over your cheerful labors today and during the past week of preparations. I want you to be with me. You may sleep in my bed tonight." And this was quite to be physically near a guru, to be near their physical body. Many people in India, if you've ever seen this or if you have that heritage, will touch the feet of a great teacher or a master or a guru. So to be physically close to that high vibration is a great blessing. So Yogananda was delighted. I mean, he was so deeply honored at this opportunity to just lay near his guru. But then there's a twist. Shri Oktashwar perceives that some people who wanted to come to the festival had missed the train. And he says that to Yogananda. Yogananda's talking about the privilege. This was a privilege, sleeping near his guru, I never thought would fall to my lot. We sat a while in a state of divine, intense tranquility. And then Master rose and began to dress, and I asked him, "What is it?" And he explained, "A few students who missed their proper train connections will be here soon. Let us have some food ready for them." And Yogananda did not want to do this. "Guruji," is his protest, "no one could come at 1 o'clock in the morning." And Shri Oktashwar says, "Well, you stay in bed then. I'm going to cook for them, but it's fine. You can stay in bed." And then Yogananda said he jumped up and followed him to the small daily used kitchen to help him make some rice and dal. And Shri Oktashwar then smiled at him affectionately and said, "Tonight you have conquered fatigue and fear of hard work. You shall never be bothered by them in the future." So I'll end with this teaching, which is often referred to, this principle of seva, to serve the divine with a spirit of willing joyfulness. It sets us free. So we have within us those things that resist. I don't want to. I want this opportunity. This feels so good. And well, now I have to go and do seva. So that's where we, within ourselves, we can have what Yogananda called mental citizens that resist. But when we learn how to rise and say, I will do this in service to God, in service to the divine, in service to another soul with joy, it frees us from that which actually makes our life harder. So another aspect of yoga is the neutralization of likes and dislikes, because they can keep us ever tossed on a sea of unhappiness. I like this, I don't like that. And what we learn in yoga practice is to find our center, to be calm in the heart and in the mind, to lift our consciousness. And in that lifted consciousness, we're able to perform duties with joy and to be free from this fear of hard work or fear of difficulty, because seva isn't burdensome at all. It's quite joyful and beautiful. So I will end with that for you today, dear ones, and I encourage you to just pay attention to your thoughts. Remember that they aren't who you are unless they're very elevated and joyful and high. That is our true soul nature. And if the opportunity to serve comes your way this week, see if you can lift your consciousness to those thoughts of joy and see what happens in your practice. Okay, many, many blessings to you. Thanks for joining today.